Welcome, everybody. My name is Keith Blackmore, one of the producers for Vancouver's Spark Animation Festival. Well, last time we were looking at part one, the history of Looney Tunes. And this week in part two, we're looking at Looney Tunes again, but we're bringing in a very special guest, Willie Ito, who was actually working at Looney Tunes and the famous Termite Terrace. So we're going to hand it back over to Jerry Beck, who's going to have a great conversation with Willie Ito. Welcome, Jerry and Willie.
Thank you. And thank you, Willie, for being with us. I've got a whole bunch of questions in my head. We're going to get to how you got there, what happened. I really want to hear about afterward as well, but I have to hone in on a couple of things I want to know about that I don't think you've even been asked about. So I'm going to do that right now. But Willie, did you were there? When were you there? Were you there from like the late 1950s into the 60s? What was the period you were at Warner Brothers?
It was 1954.
Oh,
I just got laid off from Disney. We were wrapping up Lady and The Tramp, and that summer, when I came down as a kid from San Francisco with my student portfolio, I made a visit to different studios. And one of the studios I visited was Warner Brothers, and Johnny Burton was our production manager. I showed him my portfolio, and he liked it very much. He says, I would hire you right now, except we don't train. So I said, fair enough. I figured I'm going to have to complete my 4 years at Chenard's and make up a real professional portfolio before I started seriously job hunting. But I just wanted to get feedbacks from different studios. So on the last day at Disney, wrapping up Lady and the Tramp, I got called in, and I was told that we'll have a 3 months hiatus before Sleeping Beauty comes down the pike. So I said, okay, that's fine. So I went back to my bullpen, picked up the phone, called Johnny Burton, and I says, hey, I'm experienced now. And he says, come on in. So that Monday morning, I started day one at Termite Terrace. Corny Cole happened to be in my bullpen at the same time. And that afternoon, he got notice. So when he came back into the room and said, I just got laid off. And I said, hey, Corny, here, call this number, Johnny Burton, and tell him you're available, which he did. And sure enough, Johnny says, come on in. So both Corny and I left that Friday. And that following Monday, we both were members of Termite Terrace, but we were in the bullpen with a bunch of in-betweeners.
Well, tell us about that. The bullpen. I mean, I know it later on, both you and Corny get credit on Freleng cartoons, I believe. But what does that mean to be in the bullpen? You did your work. Was your work with for any of the units?
Yeah. The bullpen meant that we were just free agents picking up scenes from any one of the directors. So fortunately, I was assigned to do a nice thick scene for Ken Harris. And apparently, Ken flipping it and reviewing it thought, hey, I like the work here. So I was, you might say, prematurely promoted because here's all these about 8 guys in the in-between bullpen waiting for their chance. Some of them, they were there for 3-4 years, just patiently waiting. And here comes Corny and myself, a couple of Johnny-come-latelys, and boom, we were assigned to, the Chuck Jones unit. Dick Thompson liked Corny's work, And so both Corny and I, we were elevated to Chuck Jones's unit at the same time. And when you go into his unit as one of the animators assistant, you're an assistant animator. So 3 months later, when Disney called me back to join the Sleeping Beauty, I told them that I have Warner's now, and I am now an assistant animator. And Disney said, "Well, we can't offer you that. You left as an in-betweener, so we'll offer you breakdown, which is the next category up." I said, "Well, does that mean I'm going to have to take breakdown pay?" "Oh, yeah." "Oh, well, then." I think
You made the right decision. You were such a major talent. If Disney didn't recognize it, you definitely ended up in the right place. Here's a question I've been I like to ask people that doesn't get asked, which is not about. I'm gonna ask you a lot about your work, but
yeah,
like you were where, at the Warner Brothers lot at this point? Is that where the studio was?
Termite Terrace was in Hollywood behind the bowling alley where KTLA is.
And that's where you were
That's initially where Termite Terrace was.
Wasn't some of the studio on the lot though by the 1950s? Burbank lot, the Burbank lot.
Yeah, eventually Jack Warner put up the money to build a so-called state-of-the-art animation studio. And of course, having started my career at Walt Disney, it was, no matter how state-of-the-art it was supposedly, match.
Oh, that's funny. So you worked in Hollywood on that, and I mean, did you? What was like normal day? Did you just drive onto a lot with a guard at the gate and things like that? Is that the way it was?
It was a freestanding building on the corner of, I think it was Van Ness and Gower or somewhere.
Yeah.
KTLA.
Yeah.
The alley used to be.
Right. And oh, that's funny. And go on.
Yeah. And if it was called Termite Terrace, it really was.
Oh my goodness. Well, who else was in that building? I don't even mean people. I mean, like you said, the bullpen. Was it inkers and painters? I mean, what other personnel were in that building at that time?
Well, the entire animation division, ink and paint, checking, camera, it was totally self-sustained.
Oh, okay. All right. And so you were initially assistant animating. Now, at this point in your story, with the Chuck Jones unit, were you used by any of the other directors at that time, or just Chuck?
When I first started there, being in the bullpen, we were, I guess you might call, free agents, and the fellow that was in charge of the in-betweeners would randomly scenes out to us. So we never knew if we were working on scenes for Bob McKimson or Friz Freleng or Chuck Jones,
Yeah.
And of course, having come from Disney, working on such a laborious scene of the spaghetti kissing scene, the close-up of Lady, every eyelash, nothing could flicker. And so we had a quota. They says, well, if you do a drawing an hour, if you turn in 8 drawings a day, you're on target. And so at the time that I left, I was up to 6 drawings, and I was quite proud of that. And then I start Monday morning at Termite Terrace, and on the very first day, I knocked out 13 Speedy Gonzalez drawings, and I was quite proud, but I was in for a rude awakening. The guy says, Hey, 13, that's you're expected to do at least 30 drawings a day.
Oh,
So we of course learn to
Speed it up.
And, but
Yes.
fortunately, with that meticulous Disney training, both Corny and I got such a good background in being very meticulous that it was right up Chuck's alley. And so whenever we worked on a Chuck Jones scene, our animators just loved it. So we were, you might say, prematurely advanced into the unit, much to the chagrin of the 8 or 10 guys in the bullpen that's been sitting there for years waiting for their chance.
I want to, before I get into more of the personalities about the directors and units and things, what I really want to ask you is, were you there when they closed the studio?
Yeah.
You were. Well, now, before that, did you work on the Bugs Bunny primetime TV show?
No, there was no TV show at that time. It was strictly theatricals.
Oh, really? Okay. And what was it like when it closed? I mean, were you literally there when they said we're closing the studio?
Well, at Looney Tunes, the whole studio would close for 2 weeks during the summer.
Yeah.
We all took vacations simultaneously, and then we would come back. So on the very last day, it says, when you guys come back in 2 weeks, you're going to be reporting to our new studio on the Burbank lot. And so this is basically your last day. It was a Friday. And so we came in the morning, and the water cooler was all red. And, it's what's going on here? She said, we'll try it, It was Bloody Marys. Ben Autumn made this whole water cooler full of Bloody Marys. And so we were drinking Bloody Marys from 8:30 in the morning, right until about 4 o'clock. Then Edward Salzer says, okay, it's party time. So we just, because that place just drove all of these veteran guys crazy because of the filth that it was. So we started to trash the place.
Oh.
And so one of the guys went to the storage and came out with a stack of cells.
Oh, wow.
We had hardwood floors that was never maintained. So now it was slippers. So you couldn't walk around in your stocking feet. So anyway, the cells were strewn across this floor, and we all, with a running start, skidded on it and left this beautiful color. All the great Warner Bros. The cartoon character colors and things of that nature, And,
oh my God. Of course, today we can only think about how much money those cells were probably worth. I also, before I get back to Warner's and those directors that Keith wants to know about and all that, one more question. I want to quickly ask you about you starting and working with Bob Clampett at Snowball at the Beanie and Cecil studio. Now, was that right after you left Warner's that you did that? I was
there 6 years.
Yeah.
Friz went to Chuck and says, "Holy Pratt, I'm training him to be a director. So I'm going to be looking for a layout man." So Friz asked Chuck if he could borrow me for one picture.
Huh.
And I said, yeah, this is a great chance for me. So I went over to Friz's unit and I laid out my very first Looney Tunes, which is the Bugs Yosemite Sam I forgot the title of it.
I'll have to look it up, but go on. Yeah.
And so apparently I did well.
Mm-hmm.
So Friz was now ready to take me on as his layout man and let Hawley start doing direction. Then I get a phone call. Now I had never met Bob Clampett.
Uh-huh.
Of course, his reputation has preceded him. So when his secretary called and wanted to interview with me with Bob, I went down, and then she says, "Well, I understand that you'd like to get into layout and character design." I said, "Yes, I very much so." Well, we've got the Beanie and Cecil show, which is hand puppets, but Mattel and ABC is buying the show, and it's going to be animated. And so your initial job will be to convert the characters into animation characters.
Really?
And I thought, hey, that's a nice challenge. And then, of course, what put the capper was the fact that he offered me double the salary I was making at Warner Brothers. So I went to Chuck and Friz, and I said, "Well, I got this offer I can't refuse from Bob Clampett, and I'm going to be leaving, taking the position." And they both says, "Oh, Bob's going to be involved in television, and that's a fly-by-night thing. We do features, theatricals, so we're going to be here forever."
Right. Little did they know.
Yeah. So that started my career at Bob Clampett. He called his studio Snowball Productions. And right about that time, Disney was discontinuing their shorts department. So boom, both Hanna-Barbera and us, we had the pick of the litter, so to speak, So I was able to build a good layout department with people like Homer Jonas and Tony Segura and Terrell Stapp, an old timer from Snow White days. And so we had a very solid group. And then we had a lot of assistant animators that wanted to get a chance to actually animate. So we hired a lot of these guys, and then they were, able to animate on the Beanie and Cecil show, and so that was a big change in a lot of their careers.
So I mean, I knew that you did the comic books. You did some of the Beanie and Cecil comic book art. I mean, be doing layouts and designing, and you did a lot. It seems to me you did a lot at that studio. Am I right about this?
Yeah. Bob sort of put me in charge of all of the byproducts also.
Right.
And so I kind of oversaw that, and then I always wanted to do comic books myself. And so the opportunity to do the Beanie and Cecil comic books, I took on the challenge. But then, putting in 8-10 hours a day on production and then going home at night and working on the comic books or Western was getting a little heavy duty. So I ended up just penciling and had a gal named Beverly Ware who was basically in Inconvene, and she followed me up doing that.
Fantastic. And it's great that you gave credit to her, because the females who worked in animation didn't get any credit, it seems to me. So it's great to name them. In a nutshell, we're going to go right back to Warner's. But when did Beanie and Cecil, did that last, a year or two?
It was just one season.
1 season.
Half hours is all we made.
Right.
And because the network had a little bit of, you know, scheduling problem, plus over budget problems and all. And, you know, Bob, you know, when the network censor says, you know, we can't have this in the film, Bob would say, well, yeah, we'll fix it. But back then, you know, the production manager literally had to take the, you know,
The negative.
negative and fly it back, take the red eye back to New York and get it to the studio by Saturday morning. So it'll, so cutting it so close, Bob would ignore some of the requests, the network. And so, so when a half hour became available that fall, we were doing a beautiful presentation work on Egerberg and then Charlie McCarthy's show.
Right.
It was very popular back then. And so when we did the presentation, we actually had Francis, Edgar Bergen, and Candace come into the studio, look at the presentation, the storyboards, and they were, you know, quite impressed. But unfortunately, that half hour that was available with ABC went to Hanna-Barbera, and that's where the Jetsons was.
Oh, right.
So coincidentally, Bob was unable to sell a new show, and Alex Loby heard that I was available. So he called me and says, hey, do you like to come over to Hanna-Barbera? And I thought, yeah, well, that'd be fine, you know. So Monday morning, I get over there. I walk into the layout department, and there's Jerry Eisenberg, who replaced me as Ken Harris's assistant at Warner Brothers, and my mentor, Iwo Takamoto. And I thought, oh my gosh, you know, all these familiar faces. Otherwise, they were all MGM Group, which I never got to know at that, you know, before Hanna-Barbera. So, you know, meeting some of these great MGM animators was quite fun.
Okay, so this is fantastic. All right, so let me go back to your Warner days. We'll shift our focus back there. All right, so okay, so you're in the bullpen. You're doing assistant animation, and you're working for pretty much any of the units that need that work at that time. Who else was working with you then? Let's start there. Who were your other? You said Corny Cole. Who else was in that group with you at that time?
Yeah. In the bullpen, most of the guys that I did work with, some of them eventually became assistants, maybe in Friz's unit or Bob McKinson's unit. But I don't really.
Well, Corny sort of became a layout designing star, it seems to me.
Yeah.
You've had an illustrious career. So I know some of the names from the credits of people who got credit later. I don't want to point anybody out, and I might be wrong, but people like Bob Matz or something like that. You know, I people who really didn't go much further than where they went. Was it that level of person, or was there nobody else who attained some kind of stardom as a director or something like that later on?
Yeah, well, you know, I guess within the realm of the Hanna-Barbera, and then later the Friz Freleng,
right?
And where Friz brought some of his old animators along with him, you know, people like Jerry Shinicki. But well, within my group, of course, I always felt like I was working with, you might say the cream of the crop Looney Tune animators like Ken Harris,
Right.
Ben Washam, Abe Levital, Dick Thompson, and it was quite a group, and not to. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, do you remember any specific anything? Because when you're working on these films frame by frame, you're you're really looking at just the drawings on a frame by frame basis. But the films themselves have gone off to become classics. And I guess from our outsider point of view, do you have any special memories of working on a scene from any specific film? Anything particularly difficult that you were asked to do on a particular film back in that time?
Well, I think one of the films that we felt was going to be a classic was What's Opera Doc.
Right. Okay. I really want to know what the behind the scenes of that, like from your point of view. You guys thought as you're doing it, okay, this one's special. This is going to be a classic. Go on. Tell us about this.
Yeah. Well, initially, we would see Mike Maltese's rough storyboard.
Right.
And I didn't really see too much humor in it. It was a lot of dancing and singing and whatever. So I thought, well, it's just one of those little films that eventually will put Chuck on the map, which it did.
Yeah.
And so, but see, Chuck sort of typecasted Ken Harris because Ken was very good in dancing scenes, So a lot of that Kill the Rabbit and all that jumping around and dancing, I worked on. And it was, Elmer's got a costume on, Bugs is dressed up, Broomhilda, and then a lot of times they're holding hands and dancing. So now you got two characters that you're going to have to in between, So it was twice as extensive work-wise. And so while we were working on it, I didn't see too much humor in it, unlike working on a Coyote Roadrunner cartoon. And every scene, something crash, boom. And so it was, just another Chuck Jones cartoon. But upon its initial screening for the staff, the whole crew, every time a cartoon was completed by any of the three directors, they would call the whole crew into the projection room, and we would all see it, And so seeing it intact with the music and all, I thought, wow, this is fun. It doesn't have the Coyote Roadrunner gags, but it's beautifully produced, and of course the backgrounds were just marvelous, and then the other classic was, of course, One Froggy Evening.
Oh yeah.
And that's another one where, I saw the initial storyboard.
Yeah.
And, without the music and all that dancing and all, thought, what a strange character this frog is, And it's out of the realm of the other Chuck Jones cartoons, but those two became such a classic.
From our point of view, meaning me who was at home as a kid watching him ultimately on TV, honestly, those 1950s Chuck Jones cartoons and the Freleng cartoons and a lot of the McKimson cartoons, we've now seen as time has gone on, they have become classics. They are classics, they're not just old children's fodder, which is the way I think Warner Brothers sometimes treats them. but they really are little gems of filmmaking. Back in that period, that was the period where UPA was dominant in the 1950s, and this stylized look and that whole thing, and that definitely got into Warner cartoons, and particularly Chuck's and Maurice Noble's layouts things, right? You see that. What was that feeling like at the time at the studio? Was there any feeling of competing with Mr. Magoo? Of course, you had Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck and everything, but I mean, obviously, it was in the air. They were winning Oscars, and so guys. But yeah.
It the competition was you could really feel it during the award period, and it was always against with MGM's, Tom and Jerry's, and then of course Chuck and Friz would enter what they felt was their award-worthy cartoons, and so now UPA. See, when I came down here from San Francisco, I got a scholarship at Chenard's,
right?
And so I my teacher happened to be Tee.
Oh yeah, Tee Thornton Key. For people listening who don't know and thought you were laughing for a moment.
Yeah. And of course, I thought it was Chinese.
Oh,
yeah. Big Caucasian guy. So anyhow, we had a class project, the shooting of Dan McGrew. And because the EPA was such a hot studio at that time, I had some desires to maybe work there also, So I purposely did my class assignment in the UPA style, designing flat colors and all.
Cool.
And we turned in our assignments, and he would review it. And I asked Iggy, do you think I'll be good for UPA? He just kind of looked at me and says, you're more suited for Disney or Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
And I just kind of felt like, let down. But in retrospect, I think, wow, that was quite a compliment.
Yeah, it is.
Because my classmates at that time was people like Jimmy Murakami and Ron Morita and George Kanata Jr. and Dolores Kanata. And, they all ended up at UPA.
Mm.
And I ended up at Disney. And I'm thinking, oh, my gosh, I wasn't a UPA material.
You were a UPA failure, but you were Disney material. I mean, it's amazing. That's so great. Oh man, wow. All right. So you're working on Warner's at that time. That was an interesting period, not only the 50s, but actually, let me go into the early 60s that we were talking about, because it unlike later, it doesn't seem like there was a drought of jobs. Meaning, it seemed like you could get a job in animation if you had the talent and you really wanted to. There seemed to be enough work between the studios that were still making shorts, the commercials were on the rise, features. There were a couple of things happening there. Is that the feeling? Was because I know later I got into this universe in the 70s and 80s later, and at that point it felt like animation was over. There really was a feeling in the 70s and 80s that it was over. And it's just hard to believe that people would think that. But the 50s seemed kind of prosperous almost. How did that feel to you?
Yeah. A lot of our assistants, like I replaced a fellow named Alex Ignatieff, who was assisting Ken, and he was leaving to go to work in a commercial studio like Quartet and Playhouse or whatever it was. And that's where the money was.
Right.
And so the exodus from theatrical cartoons was quite elevated during that period. And Frank Braxton, who was Ben Washington's assistant, he was leaving, and he went to work in Quartet or one of the commercial studios. So it was quite apparent during that period that those of us that wanted to make some extra money, that was available to us. So Ken Harris referred me to Art Babbitt, who was doing a series of Maple commercials for Quartet. And Art asked Ken if he knew of a good assistant. He said, well, my assistant, Willie, is, very good. So that was my first venture into doing outside work for commercial studios.
So wait, did you just say that you did assistant work for Art Babbitt on the John Hubley Mapo commercials? Is that what you just said?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. I did not know that. Now we have credits for that commercial. Okay. That we did not know before. Because, John Hubley gets the credit for that. And because he designed it and he's probably directed it, probably.
Right.
Yeah. So, but that's really, really interesting. So you did that like freelance moonlighting or whatever. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's exciting. Did you do a lot of that kind of thing during that period?
Yeah, I guess word got around town that, I'm a workaholic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll take on any challenges, so, yeah. So, I did a lot of commercial work.
Did you have your own animation table set up in your home?
Yes.
That's how you did it? Yeah.
Right. What I had at that time was an abandoned drawing board and disc that old Bosco cartoons were animated on.
Oh.
And it was all tattered and pencil marks and whatever else. So I salvaged that.
That's cool.
With my first wooden disc.
Yeah. Oh, made out of wood. Okay.
Made out of wood. Yeah.
Ancient history.
Exactly.
Yeah. Did you have here's one of those, I call it silly questions, but did you have a favorite character at Warner Brothers to draw? Did you prefer drawing this guy as opposed to that guy? Or maybe you had one you didn't want to draw. What can you say about that?
Well, it's funny because at Disney, people assumed, because I was a big Mickey Mouse collector, that I could draw Mickey Mouse in my sleep. But he was a difficult character to make look like Freddie Moore's or one, or even the early Floyd Gofferson Mickey's. Bugs Bunny was equally a rough character to draw. Now, all three units, Chuck, Friz, and Bob McKimson, they all had their own take on Bugs Bunny. So when I was doing layouts for Friz, the first thing Friz cornered me and says, now remember, we don't draw our bugs like Chuck does.
Right.
There's quite a difference, when you see drawings. So I had to dig out model sheets that Artie Davis did or Virgil Ross did, throwback to the more of the classic Bugs Bunny. And so when I worked on, Prince Violet was the name of the cartoon I worked on. It was later changed to Prince Varmint.
Right.
the television was.
Idol was too violent, obviously.
And so, within the studio, different animators or different directors had their own take on the characters, But it was always try to get accustomed to whoever you were assisting. Ken Harris used to animate almost straight ahead.
Oh,
So what I had to do is watch sizes. So I would clean up drawing 1 and then jump ahead to maybe drawing 20 and then make sure that the size is consistent. And oftentimes, size of the characters would also, because if we get bigger and smaller. So, I had to kind of be very cognizant of that. But the different animators did have their own little take. And of course, as you know, most of us could watch a classic Warner Brother cartoon and know, oh, there's Ben Washam's animation. Oh, this is where Abe Lefetol took over.
right.
There's Ken Harris's, So, everyone had a signature touch.
We should mention, I see your shirt with Hello Maggie, and
Yeah.
I definitely want to give you a plug for that great book that you did. And I want to get that in, but here's a question. I'm not even sure how to phrase it politically correctly, but we're friends. I think that, were you ever cast by a director to work on a project because you're Japanese or Asian? Did anyone say, Willie, what do you think? Do you think you could do this? Did that happen to you then? And I mean that in a good way. Maybe that was.
I know. I know what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah. I offhand, I can't recall. Whenever Ken Harris would co-direct
Yeah.
a cartoon, Ken would have me design the incidental characters. And so, of course, I remember we did have an Asian character, and I just kind of designed it a la the way World War II Japanese, like Hirohito and Tojo, was depicted, with the slant eyes and the buck tooth and all
This
that.
was later, like in the 50s and 60s or something.
Yeah, but I didn't think of it in the offensive way. I just figured, well, okay, it's a cartoon, and this is the way it's depicted, and so I kind of followed suit,
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know the story of when Peter Pan went into production. It was before World War II.
Oh yeah.
So in Captain Hook's entourage, there was a Chinese cook,
Oh.
and I even used to own the McCay.
Wow.
It was really a takeoff on Tojo with big buck. Well, it was a takeoff on Mickey Rooney.
My God.
And so, of course, later when Peter Pan went into real production, that character was completely eliminated from the lineup, But yeah, so during that World War II era, Asians were just sort of depicted in that manner, But
You want to talk about your briefly, just about your experience or the book, tying it into this book that you've done. This book, I guess I'll lead you off with, as I recall, I have it on my shelf. I believe it's a book aimed for children to read, right?
Yeah. Basically, my writing partner, Shig Yabu, and we both grew up in post-war San Francisco. And but he went to Heart Mountain, Wyoming, And I was incarcerated at Topaz, Utah, right in the middle of the Utah desert.
Wow.
But the two camps were quite well. There were 10 camps, and they were all quite similar. All barracks, neatly lined up, and for some reason, the government found that putting all of us in the middle of a desert or some area that was just completely, you might say, uncomfortable, seems to be was a target. Anyway, I retired from the industry in 1999, and I was prepared to just throw all my pencils in my fireplace and just relax. But Shig called me and says, "Hey, would you be interested in illustrating a story that I have written?" And I said, "Oh, Shig, after 50 years pushing a pencil, I'm exhausted, and I think I'm gonna just take it easy." But he was rather insistent. So I said, "Okay, Shig, send me the manuscript," which he did. Then reading through it, I thought, my gosh, it's about his experience in camp, but it's about adopting a bird, a little magpie. And it's a very child-friendly story, but set in the background of our incarceration. So I thought, well, my kids all, went to local schools, and I would ask them, in history, do they talk anything about the World War II and the Japanese incarceration? No, not much. They may sort of mention it, but not go in depth. And during that period, I think, a lot of publishers were a little shy about the subject matter. So for Shig and I to get Hello Maggie published by a mainline publisher was quite difficult. So we decided to self-publish it and self-promote it. So we would go to like the Japanese American Museum and give talks and go to Buddhist cherry blossom festivals and get a table there and sign books and sell it. And that was way back in 2005. And little by little, the small amount that we would print, 3,000 here, 5,000 there, what sold out.
Wow.
And so, fortunately, my benefactor, Luca Charotti in Italy, Nemo Academia, and of course Tony is here with us, Taratini. Luca was a big time collector of our work.
Yeah.
And so every time I would post or sell something to Heritage or any of the private collectors, it would sell.
Good.
I would think to myself, who the heck buys all this stuff? I did have some good stuff in my collection, like Chuck Jones' original layout drawings back then. But I had a stack of Hanna-Barbera stuff.
Uh-huh.
And so when Luca invited Tony, Jerry, and myself as the three tuners to come over to Florence, Italy, we saw our drawings beautifully framed in the Cartoon Museum there. And then, of course, at the school, the Academia. So I'm kiddingly, I says, "Hey, Luca, my gosh, you got all the drawings I ever did." And he went to the flat file, pulled it out, and it was filled with drawings of mine, Jerry's, Iwo Takamoto's, Bob Singer's. It was just, I thought, wow, this guy is big time collector. Then I noticed on the shelf was a copy of Hello Maggie, and I said, "Oh my gosh, you even got my Hello Maggie book." And kiddingly, I says, you've got these ace animation students, and it might be good to do Hello Maggie as a term project or school project. And we both laughed about it and all that. And then a couple of years goes by, and I get word that, Luca is interested in doing it. And fortunately, we got Tony Tarantini as my creative director, working out of Sheridan College. And the film is now in production.
Really?
And I don't know if we got the trailer for it.
I don't even know about this. Is it a short?
It's 22 minutes.
Okay.
We started out as a 14-minute cartoon with no funding.
Right.
And then Heart Mountain, the camp, is deemed a government park. And so during pandemic, they were giving a couple of grants.
Yeah.
And Heart Mountain was good enough to give us a grant to do 14 minutes. But now, in our conversations, we figured if we did it as a 22-minute short, might be more commercially viable.
Yeah, that makes sense. You can get it on network TV, and it's a good length for any situation, actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and well, oh boy, that's exciting, and that's very exciting. So it's being, where is it? Where's it being produced exactly?
It's an international production.
Oh, so people are working at home.
Yeah, like we started out with Sandro Cruzo doing the adaptation of my storybook version, and he adapted it to animated character.
Oh, that's very exciting. And so it's in production now.
It's in production.
You think it'll be done when? Next year sometime?
Well, our target is to premiere it next year at the Heart Mountain Pilgrimage, which is usually in July.
Okay.
And so that's our target, to get it done by then. And then
you get it done, and you make sure you submit it to the Academy and to the Annie Awards.
Oh, yes.
Things like that, because I can't wait to see that. That's going to be exciting. Wow.
Once I get about 10 pounds, I'm going to go out and get me a dark suit.
I guess we're coming towards the an ending for our little chat today. What else can you say about some of the personalities that we all know out here on the other side of the fence? People like, obviously, Chuck, Friz, and Robert McKimson, and Bob Clampett. I mean, you talked about them a little bit, but what were they like, or what were they like to you? Were they, because we don't know them as human beings. That, by the way, I do know them as human beings. I did know them. And by the way, did you ever meet, and throw into that big question, did you ever meet Tex Avery?
Oh, yeah, I worked with him when he had Cascade Films.
Okay, so those titans of the industry at that time, what were they like as people, or to work with? Willie, take it away.
Well, first of all, I regard all of these guys as my mentor, because I learned a lot from each one of them individually.
Mm-hmm.
And, working with Chuck for 6 years, I got to know him socially and, psychologically, and, and so he was a good teacher, and he himself would advocate that no matter how much of a pro you are, you should continue studying by taking night classes at Chenard's. And so that's where I first saw Chuck and Abe Levital, is when I was a student, and they were sitting in Plummer's life drawing classes, and so then of course Friz was totally opposite from Chuck, personality wise. I guess you might say he was a little bit of a Yosemite Sam character. Of course, Bob Clampett was, again, a real character.
Right.
Working with him was quite an adventure, and we had frustrating moments because it's his first venture into actually doing an animated film for television schedules and all. And so, he would call for some impossible things to be done, knowing very well that it's going to be censored, whatever. And then, of course, Bill and Joe, working with him for 14 years. And Joe was quite a mentor for us in the creative end. And so I have to, in retrospect, thinking back to all the different producers that I worked for, I learned a lot from each one of them, and I will always look back and say, wow, I had some great mentors in my career.
Yeah, you did. But you are an amazing talent on your own, and you know it. And I know that and certainly everyone who hired you knew it. And you've had an amazing career. And thank the Lord for your longevity, that you're still with us today and can tell us about what it was like back then, because it's the stuff of legends now. These cartoons were made at that time. They were made for whatever audience they were made for. You guys went home. The cartoons went into a vault, but as the years went on, the younger generation, looked at them, as I did. And we really noticed, especially as the later cartoons that were made for TV came around.
Oh, yeah.
We knew that the ones you guys made in the 50s and early 60s really stand out. They're the artist's ability, the artist's hand is in the film. By the way, that's something that's pretty much completely missing today. I don't care if it's The Simpsons or any of these things. It's even the Disney hand-drawn material. It could be very entertaining, but there's something that's missing that's in all of the classic animation. And I call it the hand of the artist. Doesn't matter. Like you said before, you can tell who animated which scene, well, you can't do that anymore. Right. So it's like a folk art, I like to say, the way animation it's all by hand. When you're watching a Roadrunner cartoon, it literally physically exists as a piece of artwork, each frame, each background. So it's a long time ago, and it's something we all hope will come back, and it'll definitely be back as long as people like Willie are still with us and can show us the way. Anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you, Willie. It's amazing. And if Willie is showing up at a festival or a convention near you, go and meet him and buy his book.
This coming weekend, I'll be attending the Disneyana Fan Club banquet, and then the next day, it'll be the show, show and sale.
Okay, is that Anaheim?
Yeah,
that's Anaheim. Yeah. You're right.
So I'll be there with a portfolio full of newly creative artwork, which is fundraising sing for my Hello Maggie film.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Willie. That was amazing. Such great stories. Thank you for taking the lead with that, Jerry. It was great questions and just such fascinating history, and to hear them from the man himself, Willie Ito. What a pleasure! What a gift we have in having you here. And it's a pleasure.
I appreciate that.
We look forward to seeing, as mentioned, Hello Maggie down the road, and that's something we can a project we can all get behind next year as well, if not now, by supporting it. So
that's great. Yeah.
thank you, everybody. Thank you for having.
Thank